Hi all, welcome back. The last time I left off, I said I was going to do the recapping and checking of the RF sections because the amplifier stage or the AF stage seemed to be doing quite well. So that's what I've done, and if you recall, I had a problem with the medium wave. When we first tested it, we got FM, we got shortwave, and we got long wave, but medium wave was very, very weak. So I had mentioned that I was going to be going through all the coil sections. I thought that it would be one of these coils, but unfortunately I've done all the checking and I still have not found the problem. Now let me just show you where this started. It starts off at the antenna coming in, all the components were checked. The capacitors, actually all the components on this section were fine in terms of tolerances. So I did the checking of the switching functions, which obviously makes it, well, it gets a bit complicated because you've got to literally test the functions on and off. But yeah, it seems, everything seems to be fine. Shortwave works well, and that is activated up there. When you activate kW or shortwave, that closes there. That passes on to the top there. So the only circuit in circuit is this coil over here and that capacitor. And then of course over here you go to the tuning capacitor. So that is the tank circuit that you're looking at when you're operating shortwave. Okay, and that seems to be working quite well. Then long wave, when you activate long wave, that stays open, that stays down. Now that stays down, and if you follow this along, what you've got is your signal coming in here. It goes, this is the ferrite antenna. If we don't activate that, your signal's coming in here. It's going through that coil and capacitor. It's going down here. It meets that resistor and capacitor. You've activated long wave, so that stays exactly where it is. So that's ground. Then the signal is generated up through here, and it's long wave, so that stays open. So this entire circuit is used as the tank circuit for long wave. And what you have here is various coils, including the ferrite antenna, which I believe is that over there. Now if you recall, the ferrite antenna was broken and desoldered. So I've checked that and it seems to be in place, and with long wave this works well. Okay, when you activate medium wave, that ground is removed and that ground is operated, so your signal comes through here, through there to ground, and somehow it makes it to the tank circuit and up there. So you're tuning with the tuning capacitor over here as well, your antenna circuit, your RF section. So I understand why the shortwave works. The problem is obviously in this lower circuit because it affects medium wave only, and long wave works because the tank circuit for long wave is different to the tank circuit for medium wave. So my guess is still that ferrite antenna. My guess is that ferrite antenna has very little to do with long wave. It just acts as a short, and I've checked continuity on there. And as I've mentioned before, checking continuity on these coils is very complicated because their resistances are very low. So the difference between measuring a continuity, measuring a proper coil resistance and measuring zero is very small, because you could have a short down there and your resistance would be zero if you measure from here, but it could also be a couple of ohms or even less than a couple of ohms. Okay, well, first of all, what I did was I did all the checking of, you see the light green is all the checking I've done since we last spoke. And that really is the RF building up. This is the This is the ECH81 mixer. Everything is fine. Changed a couple of capacitors there. Now, why did I focus first on the front end of the AM? It's because the FM is actually working, and the FM goes through these circuits. Okay, so FM goes through here. So obviously these tubes are probably fine. But anyway, the light green, as you can see, is all the checking that's been done. With very few exceptions, everything was fine. The capacitors were swapped out, as you can see in red over there. But other than that, resistor values were great. Continuity was all there, where you expect it to be. That's the first IF filter, and that seemed to be fine. There's the FM section and the AM section in one filter. That's the second, FM and AM again. Then if you carry on and you get to the F80, you have one extra filter section, which is the discriminator circuit for the FM, and there's no AM circuit in this filter can. Now the other thing is I've only got the not that I need it yet, but I've got alignment instructions for a model which seems to be similar to this one. It's the 5160. But I have no instructions for this particular model. I only have the schematic. So anyway, that got done, and I checked the function again, and I get my FM, which I haven't touched, as you can see. Literally haven't touched the FM inside that FM can. Leave well enough alone if you can, for now anyway. I think I'm going to have to open that can, because the discriminator capacitor over there, that electrolytic, is usually something I like to check and swap. So that's inside that last can. I will have to open it up. But it's obviously working, but we'll see just how well. I thought at first that the lack of medium wave might be to do with somebody tinkering inside this the IF cans, so getting it out of alignment. But if it was out of alignment, because the IF frequency is 460 kilohertz, that would affect long wave and short wave as well, and it doesn't seem to be. I haven't checked it yet, but we're getting that through, so we should also get medium wave through. So the other thing I did, and I haven't painted this in yet because I get kind of desperate. I want to see results. So I've done some checking, and what I did is I checked for the oscillator. The oscillator is working, and I guess that it was working because you do pick up something on medium wave. You pick up a couple of very strong stations on medium wave. So the oscillator is working. So this is the oscillator for AM, and on all bands it's working. And I can actually, with a little coil on the scope, I can actually see the local oscillator frequency, and it adjusts with the tuning, so that's not a problem. But I'm still not getting what I want. And so what I did was, as usual, I looked for something else to do, just to distract myself and make some progress while the thinking, well, I guess I'm not sure if it's thinking or hoping that the solution will come up for that medium wave problem. So what I did is I started working on the front of the chassis. When you're looking for some instant gratification, there's nothing like tackling the worst part of the radio. And the worst part of the radio in this case was definitely the front end of the chassis, or the worst part at the stage that I was in. This, the front, the dial glass was removed. And it's very simple. You just remove these two caps over there, and it slides out of that groove over there, and you put it away somewhere very safe, because you don't want to break that, believe me. But anyway, then the cleaning starts, and the cleaning starts with using a bunch of paint brushes. First thing I do is I take this one and just wipe out dust. This is a pretty soft brush. The next stage is with some smaller brushes, like this one here, and in fact like this one here, and dipping it in isopropylic alcohol, you start wiping, and you literally start brushing the dirt away. And then what I do is I use one of these things, which is, this is an old chopstick, bamboo chopstick, cut off little pieces of cotton wool, you know, stick it in there a little bit more neatly than that, and then there's a little spring that I made which I pull forward and tighten it, and that's what you then use to wipe away the dirt that you've loosened with the brush and the alcohol. At some point you then just get a clean one of these, put it in alcohol, and you keep wiping away. The other thing is I got to the point where I actually had to use little pieces of, this is that Scotch-Brite thing. There's one that scratches, which is this one. There's a blue one that doesn't, and I did a lot of scrubbing on here as well. And this is the result, and it's pretty neat. This is, well, when you look at the original and you look at this one, you'll probably agree that it is pretty neat. The back end does not need painting because I think it's actually come out close enough. I did a little bit of painting at the top here, just the top section. This top bar was pretty rusty. Well, it wasn't rusty, it's a tarnish, which actually would probably protect it for another 50-60 years, but I decided to put on just to paint it to make it look nicer. So that was done as well. The sides are painted with the metallic paint. It's like a stainless steel, which again gives it a cleaner look. I may do a second coat, I'm not sure, but that'll certainly protect it as well. And the way to do this, you actually do remove everything you can so you can paint underneath. And then very carefully with a very fine brush, you start painting that. Now obviously the thing to do would be to spray paint it, but for that you'd have to remove everything, and I bet you'd mess something up. So it's always a bit of a compromise, and that was mine. The most dramatic change is in the switches, because everything here was completely blackened with dirt. And this is, again, using that brush. Well, this brush, a lot of alcohol, a lot of cotton wool, a lot of those cotton buds, and you clean it millimeter by millimeter. You know, you push this switch down, you clean on the inside and in front, and then you push this one down, you clean the sides. So everything is done very meticulously so you can get everything out. And the result is really amazing. I mean, a little bit of before and after really shows you just what a difference the cleanup makes. The result of all this, obviously, is that if you're looking for inspiration, then you're looking for gratification first. And this really makes you feel good about the whole thing, because you can get despondent. When you're looking for a bloody medium wave channel that's not coming through, it gets pretty frustrating. So when you do this, you get nice and motivated, and you see everything shining. I've repainted these markings on there. One of them had faded away. When cleaning this, you obviously then also lubricate it afterwards. Make sure it's all lubricated properly. And the inspiration is such. Oh, and the light bulbs, the two bulbs were obviously repaired. Now both these bulbs work. And the other thing I had to do, which was actually really worrying me, was that the dial cord on the AM capacitor had come off. And this is a challenge. You see, the dial cord goes in there around this guy. Again, I had no drawings for this particular radio, so I had to revert to the 5160, which I hoped was exactly the same, and it was close enough. But you really have to get inside here, because these two cords, the two sides of the cords, actually bind inside there. Then you've got to get it winding the right way and all the way around and so on. And that's a real pain in the ass. And this is the sort of thing you really want to do when you've just had some instant gratification, believe me. So using this guy, this drawing, this is the FM one, which was fine. And the top one was the AM one, which seemed to be pretty much the same. It's not exact, but it's pretty much the same. You put the point at the end there, and you can actually count the number of turns that it goes around everything. And it should work. Now, what I found was that it does in fact work. The spring that was on here was stretched way beyond what it should have been. So I put a new spring in here. Cleaned up the dial pointer, which is full of dust. Wrapped it around properly. Once I had this in, I did that, okay? And I now am fairly confident that this thing is properly set. And also, I can get the capacitor all the way to the end. When this dial pointer starts getting close to that pulley on this end, that's when the capacitor is fully closed. When the dial pointer gets pretty close to that end there, that's when the capacitor is fully open, or vice versa, it doesn't matter. So I think this is in the right position. And it tells me that the number of turns and all the ratios are fine. That's the most important part. The one problem that I am having is when I have it on any of the AM channels, like shortwave here, the tuning doesn't always grab properly. So sometimes I'm turning the dial, you can see this thing going around, and the capacitor doesn't turn. Now this way seems to work quite fine. When I go the other way, there you see, it's going around and the capacitor is barely moving. So there, it's slipping. Now these guys have a gear system, and I think it's the gear that's slipping. It's not actually the cord, because sometimes this slips because your dial string is not properly taut, so you've got to change the spring you have. But this one seems to be fine. It's actually the gearing that's loose. You see, the way this works is that it's got the AM winds around that pulley system there, and the FM winds around the back. So if I put it on FM, the back gets pulled in, and that's your FM tuning. And your AM capacitor stays exactly where it was. If I put it on one of the others, this thing moves back. Watch. So that one moves off and that one starts catching, and now when you move there, it's grabbing the front, and there's like a clutch system inside here. Now there are various ways of affecting that. One of them is that the clutch system on one or both of them might actually be worn through, and you can actually put some sort of abrasive material in there and help it catch. But that's a sneaky way of doing it. The other way is you've got springs on the back here that actually tighten the pulley towards the central pivot point. So you can actually tighten the springs, which you need to remove the whole thing for. The other way is you can actually loosen this guy here and move it slightly forwards or backwards. So because I've got this working fairly well, it only catches sometimes, I think a little bit more experimentation is needed, moving this thing backwards and forwards just to see where the right position would be so that both the AM and the FM clutches clutch correctly. So that's the next little challenge there. There's one more, and that is that the off switch doesn't always work. So I have the power off over there, but the off switch goes off, but then when you push it on, it doesn't always work. And I've determined that it's got to do with the FM selector that doesn't always spring back properly, which means that it doesn't sort of reset the off switch properly. So when you have it on, when it's on with any one of the types or the inputs that you choose, you can then switch between them without a problem. So if I've got it on shortwave over here, I can easily put FM back to shortwave, medium wave, long wave, or the pickup. But once you put it off, it sometimes is a pain in the butt to get the thing to come on again. So I've got to check what's happening with the switch. The way this works is there's a toggle switch inside there, which is a real pain to get to on this particular radio, because it's a toggle that gets pulled one way and the other, and it latches in the off position when you push this down, and it sort of snaps back when you push one of the others. But the toggle is very, very difficult to get to because it's underneath the entire switching system. You really would need to dismantle the whole thing to get to it. So I'm hoping that by going through the cleaning process again with the underside of these, I may get this thing to spring back properly and avoid having to dismantle this whole thing, because I really don't want to do that. The other little thing that I'm waiting for is this, if you recall, these guys, you see the red dot over there? Red dot there, that's the graphic equalizer. And this thing has a red line, which is like an elastic that goes through them, and it gives you a visual indication of the equalizer positions. Now, this thing was broken and really dried out. It's literally like a little red, thin red elastic. Now, one of the viewers has kindly offered to send me a piece. He's got some extra. I'm waiting for that. So I'm going to continue with cleaning the front panel. I won't consider it, I'll put it back in here temporarily because I'll be taking that out again, obviously. So I think that's about it for now. I'm going to keep looking at the medium wave problem and see if I can't sort that out, because that really is a pain in the butt.